In this guide, you're going to learn exactly how to climb by learning the single most important thing to work on at every rank on your journey. Most players will often hit a wall and get stuck because they're grinding the wrong skill for the rank they're in. Fix that and climbing gets way easier. More importantly, every concept you learn here builds on the last one, so it keeps stacking in value. So what you work on to get out of silver will continue to help you as you make your climb all the way to diamond. Let's begin all the way at iron at the very beginning of each player's journey. If you ask most coaches, this is a rank that you'll get out of naturally after simply playing enough games. Iron is just about grinding League until you get a good idea of what most champions do, how the map works, and when you're strong and or weak. However, we don't like this answer. Maybe you feel like you've grinded a long time and you're stuck there longer than you think you should be, or you're a newer player and want to climb faster. Either way, there is a simple method to try and get out of iron quicker: isolated practice. A lot of players don't consider this an option because they think of League as mostly a video game, but if you think of it as a sport to get better at, you'd realize that it makes no sense to hop into matches immediately to practice. For example, if you wanted to learn how to dribble the ball in football or soccer, whatever you prefer, you wouldn't try to learn to do so in the middle of a real match. There's way too much going on for you to even try to practice it. Instead, you'd likely spend time only practicing how to dribble until you got better at it, and then you could apply those skills in a real game. In the same way, if you're iron in League, you would get so much more value out of just going into the training tool to practice some core skills. Here's what we'd recommend you get a good grasp on before you start just mindlessly spamming games. First, unlock your camera. If you haven't yet, just do it. A lot of players are afraid to take this plunge, but the longer you put it off, the harder it will be to get rid of this habit in the long run. And it's much easier to get the hang of this practicing in the training tool when you're not afraid of losing a game. What most players do is unlock it and recenter their camera when they need to by using spacebar, or any other keybind you'd prefer. Another method a lot of players use is to actually hold down spacebar when they need their camera centered, and then they let go when they need to unlock their camera. Next, make sure you practice last hitting on your main champions, or clearing the jungle depending on your role. You really want to be able to autopilot your farming, especially during the laning phase. It's much harder to think about what your opponent is going to do and how to counter it if you have to focus on last hitting every 3 seconds. Third, you should work on your movement during combat. Basically, you always want to be input buffering movement commands in between every auto or spell you use. For example, if you're chasing someone down, you want to auto, buffer a movement command to keep chasing, auto, and repeat. If you don't do this, what often happens is that your character will stand still in between autos and your target can easily get away. And it's the same thing with spells. During your spells animation, you want to buffer a command so your champion is immediately moving after finishing the cast animation. This way, you're less likely to get hit by skill shots and able to reposition constantly. If you find your movement to be clunky, you'd get a lot of benefit by just practicing buffering movement commands in the training tool. League becomes way easier when you're not standing still too much during combat. Lastly, you should look up a good build for your champion and make a custom item set. Your goal here is that you should never have to think much about how to build your champion in a match. Everything should be laid out easily in front of you, letting you adapt however you need to. Of course, we highly recommend our free website that gives you the best builds for every single character you want to play. Not only that, but when and how to adapt your build if you need to. This makes it pretty easy to build a simple item set to get started. Once you've got these down, you can start going into real matches. With a bit of grinding, you'll slowly learn how the game works and should start climbing out of iron relatively fast. Awesome, you're mastering the basics and you've made it to bronze. What now? What most players should know is that League of Legends is a game about champion mastery above all else. League definitely has a lot of strategy elements to it, but the thing that will get you climbing the fastest is 100% learning the what and whens of your champion. Every champion is fairly unique in this game. So step 1 is to figure out what your champion wants to do in a match. Let's take a simple example. A champion like Veigar is extremely weak early and wants to farm up his passive stacks, granting him ability power. So what Veigar wants to do is play safe early and farm up until he's strong. And you can see our Veigars doing exactly that during the early lane. But then you want to ask yourself, when does my champion get to do what they're strong at? At what items or levels does your character actually feel powerful? And when are you most likely to win a fight? Veigar is at his best the longer the game goes, and when he's surrounded by his teammates in grouped up fights. After around 2 items, he really wants to group up because his cage is an amazing setup tool that lets him CC and zone enemies, enabling him and his team to focus players down one by one. Or let's take Tahm Kench as another example. He's a tank who's a very strong lane bully during the early levels, so he almost always wants to be trading and trying to go for kills early. But when are his strongest points in lane? Well, the reason he's such a bully is because his Q is such a powerful 1v1 ability. So Tahm is at his strongest every time he puts a point into it, at levels 4, 5, 7, and 9. You can see the second that Tahm hits level 7, he's immediately looking for an all-in, scoring another solo kill. The goal of understanding what you want to do and when you want to do it is to know when you're in a strong position, but more importantly, when you're not supposed to be fighting. Knowing when you should be holding back is often more important than knowing when to go in. Take Corki. He's a champion that really power spikes on 2 items once he's got Trinity Force and Mirror Mana. Right now, Corki has his tier fully stacked, but he hasn't bought his item. Look at his team's score. They are hard winning the match, so Corki is pushing towers with his team and helping in fights. But notice how he's not fully committing to these engages. Corki knows this isn't his best moment to fully go in, since this isn't his ideal time to fight. So he's kind of helping, but being pretty cautious at the same time. But watch the immediate difference after Corki buys his power spike. In the next fight, he's using his escape forward and going extremely aggressive into the enemy team while melting all of them. Being able to recognize immediately what you should be doing and when is what will allow you to instantly recognize when you should be going in and getting kills, but also when you should be playing back and waiting for a better opportunity. By the way, all these games are from educational commentaries from our website, where we have challenger players go into your ELO and your champions to show you exactly what you should be doing at every point in the game to make learning easy. Cool, now that you've gotten a good grasp on your main champions, you're going to be entering Silver ELO. And here is where you need to start learning the fundamentals. League is a game with a billion variables, so it can feel intimidating to know what you should be doing every second of the match. The fundamentals are there to give you guidelines for what you should be doing with minion waves and on the map at all times. If you always have a good idea of what you should be doing, it's way more likely things go in your favor. For example, here's how some simple wave control knowledge can win you lanes instantly. And we'll be taking a look at the support perspective, because this is a role where a lot of players often overlook their minion fundamentals. Early on into this lane, Thresh used one of the most basic fundamentals of all, level up timers. In bot lane, you will hit level 2 on the second wave after 3 melee minions die. You can see that with this knowledge, he's moving forward before the minions have even died, so he hits level 2 in the enemy duo's face. This gives him a clean engage, where he forces the enemy Jinx's summoner spells. From there, Thresh and Jhin crash the wave and both base. This is because when you crash a wave, it will bounce back towards your side of the lane. So a basic fundamental is to always try and crash a wave before you base. Once they're both back in lane, a lot of players tend to mindlessly hit minions, but Thresh isn't hitting the wave, even though he could be proccing a support item to get extra gold. This is because slow pushing is one of the best wave tactics when you're looking to fight. Having a minion advantage will make it way easier to go in later, so Thresh wants the wave to keep pushing as slowly as possible. Slow pushes also make it really hard for your opponents to walk up, since you can just walk past the wave and zone them like this. So if Jinx wants to farm, she has to walk into danger. This is precisely what gives Thresh the opportunity to go in, letting them win the fight and secure a double kill. And it's all thanks to basic laning fundamentals. Then in the mid and late game, if you ever feel lost and don't know what you should be doing, macro fundamentals are what will make each game feel much clearer. Take this Wukong. He won lane, now he wants to spread his lead and help the rest of his team. So he uses one of the easiest and best fundamentals of all, the push and collapse. All you're doing is pushing a minion wave as deep into the enemy side of the map as possible. This forces someone on the enemy team to defend the wave, otherwise you just hit their tower. Then, while your opponent is forced to stay defending, you group up and make a play somewhere else with a numbers advantage. So Wukong lurks around the Raptor camp and finds an engage on Katarina for a free kill. But the best part of a push and collapse isn't even over yet, because Wukong pushed the wave so deep into the enemy side of the map, Urgot is just now threatening the tower. Wukong had plenty of time to make a play and get back to defend his own lane before he lost anything. This is how you get reliable and predictable advantages on the map, with tried and true fundamentals that work every single game, no matter what champions you're playing. On your journey through Iron to Silver, it is so important that you learn to play your champion and the fundamentals properly. Because we're entering Gold ELO soon, where so much of the player base gets stuck because they encounter a huge issue. This is why at SkillCapped, we put so much priority on our fundamental courses to teach you everything you need to know from start to finish, all in a super easy way to understand and apply. Whether you're Iron and you're looking for some starter courses like settings or mechanics to get started, we have you covered. Or you're Bronze and really want to master your champion. Then we have Challenger players doing pure educational commentaries with none of the YouTube clickbait. Just great players teaching you exactly how to play your champion. Or you're Silver and up and you want to start mastering the fundamentals. Well, we've got those covered too, with a course on every important fundamental you need to master. And then you transition into your role courses, where you learn how to apply those fundamentals to your specific role. We have everything you need to climb fast and efficiently regardless of your rank. And we're so confident in that we offer a zero-risk money-back guarantee. If you don't climb at least 5 divisions using our service, you get your money back, no questions asked. So if you're serious about climbing, then click the discount link in the description or pinned comment below to get started. We finally get to Gold ELO, and this is one of the most interesting ELOs to be in for your League journey. If you are Gold, you are really good at League, no matter what anyone says. Players don't just stumble into this rank. You can't just pick up League League and climb this high with zero effort. To get gold in League, you need to put in some serious time and practice to get there, and you should be proud to be at this rank, which makes what we're about to say sound really counterintuitive. This will be our only mentality tip of this video, since we found so many gold players struggle with it. On your way to gold, you've likely developed a lot of bad habits on the climb up, but because you're starting to get good, you might be too unwilling to change your perspective on things. Think about it. To get here, you had to go through iron, bronze, and silver. These are the lower ranks where players aren't that great yet. So just because certain strategies worked on your climb to gold does not mean that they'll continue to work as you keep climbing higher. For example, one of the most common bad habits we see is from junglers around this ELO. Because the lower ranks have almost zero objective awareness, so many junglers climb to gold by just prioritizing taking dragons or grubs when they spawn. But you can't just mindlessly try to force objectives whenever you want anymore. Your opponents know what you're up to, so you need to secure other advantages before just trying to get an objective like dragon. We see the same thing again in this match. The enemy Pantheon ganks top lane on the minimap and very obviously walks towards the grubs. He's completely ignoring the fact that mid lane has priority right now and can rotate over, and as a result, he ends up throwing his lead just because he's tunnel visioned on securing an objective. Of course, it isn't just junglers with bad habits. This Talon definitely developed a really bad one of his own. Talon as a champion is extremely hard to kill since he can always E over multiple walls to get away from danger. So he's developed a bad habit of always fighting around walls and trying to bait players to try and kill him, knowing that he can just get away during the fight by hopping a wall. But his confidence in getting away from dying is actually what's causing him to lose, because even though he's not dying, he is taking random damage, which causes him to lose lane pressure. If you watch him, it's very clear that he has this horrible habit. After killing Nasus next to Yone, look at him. He keeps clicking forward into Yone, knowing that he can potentially get away with his E over this wall, but Rakan was coming, so he just ends up dying. Same thing later, he forces a trade he has no business forcing, but he thinks it's okay because he's next to a wall, so he just gets chunked. This is precisely what you need to fix as a gold ELO player to get to platinum. You need to be brutally honest with yourself about how you climbed to gold in the first place. Did you pick up any bad habits on your way up against players who didn't know how to punish you? Do you tunnel vision on objectives or always play the exact same way every single game and not adapt to each match? Gold is the ELO where players are actually getting good, and you're not going to get much further if you're constantly making mistakes that are way too easy to punish. Now, let's say you fix some big problems in your own gameplay, which means you make the climb all the way to platinum. To get past here, you need to take a step back to what we learned in bronze, but optimize it even further. For bronze, we discussed how the best way to climb in League is learning what your champion wants to do and when they want to do it. Recognizing advantages lets you know when you should play aggressively on your individual champions. But platinum isn't just about recognizing what your champion is good at. Instead, the key to climbing out of this ELO is learning to force situations that are good for you more often. Let's look at another mid lane game featuring a Diana. First, we need to answer, what is Diana great at? Well, she is a very selfish character that does very well in small duels and skirmishes in the early game, since she has so much DPS and burst. She's also one of, if not the best tower pushing character in all of League of Legends. So a lot of Diana's gameplay revolves around being in a side lane and pushing aggressively to hopefully find an isolated tower to destroy. Looking at the current game state, Diana is in mid lane, while her team just took Dragon and is basing. Not only this, but the Rift Herald is spawning in 30 seconds. What Diana plans here is perfect for her champion. When you're playing a split pusher, you want to look for situations where you're ahead on tempo. What this means is that you can go to a side lane before your teammates are even in a position to fight. So she pushed mid and went bottom before the Rift Herald had even spawned. This gives the enemy team only two options. First, they send one person to defend versus her, while sending the other four to Rift Herald. Diana is quite happy in this case. She's a strong duelist and can likely beat Echo 1v1. Or the second option is what the enemy team goes for. They ignore her completely and go fight at Herald with 5 players. But Diana is following the best fundamental for split pushing in solo queue, which is pressuring a tower before your teammates have a chance to die. When she hovers her camera to the Herald, her teammates are just now starting to fight while she's already at the enemy tower. Why this matters is because her teammates should have just backed off. Sadly, it's solo queue, so of course they're not going to. But by already being at the tower before the fight even begins, Diana guarantees that she can cross map and secure the entire tower and funnel all that gold into herself. This was the worst case scenario that most players are afraid of when they split push. Your entire team dies while you tried to side lane. Diana as a character often doesn't mind this though, because she scales so well with gold in the mid game, she got massively ahead of that trade. So now she's running around killing everyone who comes into contact with her. Forcing good situations for your champion is important for both macro, but also the lane phase. Let's hop back into this Tom Kench example we looked at earlier, but analyze it a bit further this time. After Tom killed Jax at level 5, he did something really smart to set himself up. Let's listen in.
Actually, this is fine. Okay, so notice we're gonna count the minions here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 versus okay, so the health bar matters. So they have 5 healthy minions. I have only 3 casters. So this wave is actually going to be very, very good for me if I just take a recall there.
This small decision is a perfect understanding of Tahm Kench. Your wave clear sucks, so it's hard to crash waves quickly before your opponent respawns. Secondly, it keeps the wave in the perfect position to continue fighting. Versus Jax, you don't really want to go for a long trade since his ultimate is OP in longer fights. So having the wave close to his tower lets Tahm look for small trades while preventing Jax from going all in. This lets him slowly whittle Jax down until he's ready to commit for a kill. And that is how we forced a situation that was great for Tahm, which allowed him to set up this kill we looked at earlier, which all stemmed back from this decision that happened over a minute ago. This is the type of foresight that will get you out of Platinum, knowing what your champion is good at and forcing situations that you're likely to win. And if you're able to do that, it means you are an exceptional player and you've likely entered Emerald ELO. This is the weirdest ELO bracket of all in League, and everyone knows it. It dates back to when streamers would often do an unranked to Challenger series. Most Challenger players can easily have a 100% win rate all the way through Platinum, but the second they hit Emerald, that stopped, and it became the new supposed ELO hell. A big reason is because Emerald players are really good at League of Legends, so it's hard to beat them 100% of the time. The League player base has improved so much that the average Emerald player is better than even Faker was back in the day. The players in this ELO have likely put a ton of time into their champions and have solid mechanics, and good macro decisions are starting to become consistent. But at the same time, this leads Emerald players into having massive egos. So lots of toxicity goes around in this bracket. And while they are really good at the game, Emerald players are technically what we'd call low elo because they do still make a lot of mistakes that good players can exploit easily. So how do you climb out of here? One of the most consistent things we've noticed when reviewing Emerald elo gameplay is that in this bracket, players are closing off their options too quickly. When playing a game of League, having a lot of options for what you can do makes it much harder for your opponents to counter you. Let's think about a champion like LeBlanc, for example. When trying to pick a fight with LeBlanc, if all her spells are up, it feels almost impossible to know what she's going to do, right? She has a billion dashes with her W and R, her passive when she gets low, and it's just so messy trying to fight her. But when all of her spells are down, it feels super simple to kill her, right? Just like any other mage, she just dies to some simple play. This is the concept what most Emerald players are lacking. When you keep multiple options in fights or even in macro open, it makes it hard for your opponents to know what to do, which makes it more likely they make mistakes. But if you only have one option after closing all your other ones, you're really easy to punish. Take this Jax, for example. Umbessa was winning lane, but then made a mistake, walking into him and losing most of her health. So now this lane is very dangerous for both players. Unfortunately, the enemy Scion comes to help Jax first, so Umbessa is in big trouble. But Jax gets impatient and fully commits with his Q and E. Now he has no options left, which makes Umbessa's turn really simple. She just R's him in the face and gets away while scoring a kill. This is what we mean by players closing off their options. If Jax had held his spells and simply waited to see what his Scion did, Umbessa would lose options. She can't R if Jax just dodges it with his Q, and it's hard to just run away when all her spells are down. So it's not obvious what she should do, but when Jax jumps in, it makes it really simple for her. Now let's watch one of our Challenger support players, Pocket Rhino, and compare the difference. As he's hovering his Zyra in mid, Evelynn pops out to try and kill her, but because Pocket on Rel is guarding her, she quickly has to disengage and R away. So Pocket moves into the topside jungle to guard there instead. Unfortunately, Evelynn pops out of stealth, and because he sadly missed his Q, he gets chunked hard. This is where a lot of players might freak out. Pocket could just slam his R and W to try and kill the Evelynn with no R, but that would leave him no options and would allow the Kai'Sa to jump in since she'd know that there's no CC left to threaten her. So instead, Pocket just chills and keeps his options open. Then when he sees a much better opportunity, that's when he finally commits his combo on Evelynn. Sadly, she gets away, so Pocket has to run Flash over the wall to escape. This play has been a bit awkward so far, so as things are looking bad, Pocket eyes the blast cone as a potential getaway tool, but he does not click it. He doesn't need to yet, as that would immediately take him out of the fight. Instead, he just waits to see what his opponents do. Kled panics that Rel could get away and just fully commits. This lets Pocket dance around him and blast Kled out of the fight instead. Now, as this Kai'Sa is getting low, it looks like a good idea to W back in and help his team, but Pocket just chills. Kai'Sa might have Flash or her E. It's not guaranteed to work work if he goes in. So he just mostly watches and waits for a better opportunity. He's just waiting until Yasuo comes to try and kill him. And that's when he finally hops over the wall, wasting his time. Then he just plays with his team and slowly cleans up the fight. This was not even a perfectly played fight. He missed quite a few Qs, to be fair, but Pocket was extremely obnoxious in this fight because he never fully committed his spells. The enemy team wasted so much time trying to kill him because they just didn't really know what he was going to do. If you don't fully commit, it means your opponents don't really know what you're up to, which makes it far more likely they make mistakes trying to kill you. You want to keep your options in fights open until you're certain it's the right time to go in. This can also apply to macro, and it's a big part of why pushing waves before fights is so important. After pushing this bot lane wave, Kayle has given herself a bunch of macro options. If she wanted to, she could flank the enemy team through their jungle because she's pushed up so aggressively. Or if her team was losing the fight, she could just keep pushing bottom and threaten the inhibitor. Or she can also just regroup with her team and play a standard team fight. Having more options means you can always pick what's more likely to have a better outcome. The better you are at this, the more likely it is you're going to climb out of Emerald and into Diamond. This is the final hurdle between you and the big boy brackets. So what should you focus on to climb out of here? Well, so far we've spent so much time emphasizing what you can do better, but as a PvP game in League, you can be very rewarded for being disruptive and annoying while your opponents have an advantage over you. Think about it like this. Which side has an advantage can often go back and forth in a game of League. So maybe in a match, you have the advantage 50% of the time and your opponents have the advantage 50% of the time. In Diamond, most players kind of know what they should be doing most of the time. So if you do nothing to disrupt it, games will feel like a coin flip because both sides are just trading advantages back and forth. What a good player does is be annoying during their opponent's advantages, or turns as we'll call them. And this might let you have the advantage 60% of the time in the match, compared to your opponents only having it 40% of the time, which means you win more games. That might be hard to envision, so let's look at some examples. In this match, Ashe is in mid lane and is doing pretty well for herself. If you're a Diamond player, you should pick up on this quickly. The problem is that her team is behind on tempo. Nasus has to clear a bunch of his camps. Tahm Kench is roaming around the jungle for whatever reason and is no push in top. And Syndra isn't really pushing either. So technically, Ashe can't do anything right now while her teammates are effectively AFK, and the enemy team is more likely to group up first. Meanwhile, her teammates wouldn't even be able to cross map or anything like that because they're not really pushing up or anything just yet. Right now, Ashe should just play safe and wait for her team, but that's not how good players actually think. Instead, Ashe fully goes in at a terrible time. She manages to kill Sivir and chunks Soraka pretty hard. This isn't a great play, but it does show you that challenger players are willing to fight even when they technically shouldn't. Here's why. First, your opponents are way more likely to let their guards down when they have an advantage. You can see Sivir let Ashe walk up to fight because she knew she had her team backing her up, but Ashe knew that the enemy team was like 8 to 10 seconds away from fully grouping. So Ashe had a small but relevant window to punish the Sivir who thought she was safe. Although she didn't want to die, Ashe trading kills here is not bad because she wasted the enemy team's turn. Have you ever seen a player willingly get ganked and just flash away from the play? This is because using resources to waste an enemy player's time and their turn will give your team an advantage in the long run. Likewise in this play, remember how we said Ashe's team is down on tempo? Well, she traded 1 for 1, and she chunked Soraka, all while it was the enemy team's turn to do something on the map. So they've wasted their turn, and now it's Ashe's team who has the advantage. They group up in mid while Soraka is in base, which means they get to have a favorable fight since they're up a player. We're not saying Ashe planned any of this, but it goes to show you the willingness that challenger players have to fight at a disadvantage if they think it might disrupt what the enemy team wanted to do. Here's another much simpler example. LeBlanc sees an opportunity to kill the enemy Twitch and goes for it. It does take a bit of effort though, so she ends up on low health on the play. Not only this, but Sylas did Dragon and is now also low on HP. So the enemy team actually has an advantage right now, and it's risky to stay here. But LeBlanc does so anyway, even with almost zero vision. Because if she can crash this wave, it won't matter if the enemy team has a tempo advantage. She'll disrupt it by forcing them to defend their tower. Sylas dies, but LeBlanc knew she could make this play and barely get out, all because of LeBlanc's amazing mobility. Look at the result. Katarina chased her, so now she has to run all the way back to her tower to catch the waves, losing all the tempo advantage she had. Meanwhile, LeBlanc is already heading back to base. Now LeBlanc is fresh off a good base and is ready to pressure, while Katarina hasn't even spent her gold. Unfortunately, LeBlanc's bot lane doesn't listen to her pings, so Katarina's desperate play in mid works. And the reason it's desperate is because Katarina was so behind on tempo that she shouldn't have gone for this, because she now needs to base while LeBlanc is just wailing on her tower, getting a bunch of plates and damage. Then when she gets back out on the map, she has to clear the wave at the tower, which gives LeBlanc a super easy trade opportunity, costing Katarina half her health. So now LeBlanc has a ton of pressure and has priority once again, letting her clear vision and get a base off first, which will turn into more advantages later. What we're getting at is that this all started with LeBlanc at a disadvantage with no vision and low on HP, but she took a risk to push a wave, because if you think about it, the last things your opponent want to do when they have an advantage is walk backwards to farm a wave at their tower. This is what a good player will do to get past Diamond. It's one thing to know when you're the one in the strong position in a match, but to climb further, you need to constantly test your limits and see what you can get away with, because learning to disrupt your opponent's turns will allow you to shut them down more often in a match, giving them less opportunities to do things while you get way more opportunities to build your own advantages. And we're gonna wrap up things here after Diamond, because once you get to Masters and upwards, League becomes a way more serious game where you need to put an absurd amount of time and effort to climb further. We'd rather focus on the other 99% of the player base who want to reach their rank goals as quickly as possible. As you've seen throughout the guide, if you want to learn from challenger players who specialize in teaching how to climb out of low elo, then you need to check out SkillCapped. We have everything you need to climb, from starter courses to settings, mechanics, as well as the all-important fundamentals like macro, wave control, and trading, which all lead to your role-specific courses where you learn how to apply everything you've learned to dominate games in your role. And if you need extra guidance on how to play your specific champions, we have those too, with a massive library of commentaries all designed to help you learn any champion you want to play. If you're tired of grinding mindlessly and want to start climbing fast, then sign up today with the discount link in the pinned comment below. Thanks for watching. See you next time.